I wouldn't say it's always easy to fight corruption. I think if it were easy, we'd be much further along in the fight against corruption globally. But we at GIZ, the Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, we've worked on developing practical solutions to work with our partners in developing countries to help them fight the problem.
I think it is possible for a society to control corruption. In other words, to have corruption as a sort of an exceptional behavior. But, and we know that this is possible because there are a few societies in the world which have succeeded in doing this. But the bad news is that there are actually very few such societies, and the great majority of countries in the world currently are actually quite corrupt. So the answer is really, it is possible to build control of corruption, but it's only a minority of countries which have succeeded of doing this successfully in their history, and the task should not be underestimated. We now have 15 years since we fight corruption in an organized way, and in fact there are very, very few success stories, and the overall global story is one of stagnation, is not one of progress.
I actually think there's a lot of achievements out there. A lot of knowledge has been generated. We at GIZ, for example, have been working with our partners in identifying what works in the fight against corruption. And one of the things that we use a lot is actually the issue of transparency. What we found in our work is that if we help our partners promote transparency, that goes a long way in uncovering corruption and preventing corruption. And let me give you one example. We've worked with schools in Honduras. And one of the problems that they had there is that they were teachers who weren't teaching, so-called ghost teachers. And what the schools have done is they set up transparency bulletin boards where they put down the names of all the teachers in the school, and so the parents could compare whether the teachers are actually showing up for work or not. And just by knowing that, they started complaining, and a lot of teachers were actually fired. They had to pay back the salaries because they weren't teaching, and the government could use those funds to actually employ teachers who are really teaching there. So transparency has really gone a long way in helping students in Honduras and parents in Honduras and schools in Honduras to do a better job at providing the services that students really need for their own development and the country as well.
I think there are two achievements in the past 15 years since we fight corruption. One is awareness, the fact that now we have managed to impose the fact that the norm is not corruption, which might surprise you in Germany, but actually in many societies corruption is a norm. So imposing the fact that whoever is in government doesn't have the right to distribute to himself more than to the rest of the citizens is quite significant progress. And the second is that we have created some legislation against corruption. And in the next 15 years all this have to show some impact, because what we have missed until now is simply changing any societies with what we have created in the past 15 years.
There's a number of things that we can do as development cooperation. Let me give you an example. We work in Cameroon. Cameroon is a country that is really corrupt. I've actually been there myself, and I've seen how it works. If you just take the example of government funds that are supposed to go to a village to build schools and hospitals and roads, very often the money doesn't arrive there, or only maybe half of the money arrives there, and the rest disappears. And what we've done is we've actually gone to the communities and told them about the money that is supposed to arrive at that level. And they said, we didn't know, we had no idea. And they started complaining to government about where the funds went and that they needed them to build schools and build roads, and that they really wanted to use the money for the purposes intended. And the government reacted on that. In the end, actually, we found that a lot more of the funds, in some communities even almost 100% of the funds, arrived at the village level. And the government officials could, together with the villagers, use that money to build schools and to complete roads and also, give them a sense that they have a say in the development of their country. And I think that is a fairly simple approach that we've taken, but one that is very effective and one that mobilizes people and works with them and strengthens the relationship also between governments and their citizens.
Two things. I think that first thing is that they should stop feeding corruption. A lot of development aid actually has fed corruption in quite an extraordinary way by providing resources for corrupt elites. When corrupt elites finish stealing from their own country, they have development aid and various other things to feed upon and go on forever. And the second thing that we can do is to actually try to build strategies which help people in their countries who really have in their best interest to change the situation and to fight corruption. And this is new for us because in many, many situations actually we are giving anti-corruption money directly to people who thrive on corruption. And it would be quite a shift of paradigm to go to those who lose from corruption and who really try to change the situation.
We can do a lot, but we can't do it on our own. It's important to work with governments and different institutions. It's important to also work with civil society organizations to get citizens engaged in the fight against corruption. And it's important also to work with the private sector. And I think collectively we can go a long way in fighting corruption.
We have quite a number of models, but I think that the best model is to conceive that a state can be reformed simply by including people who lose and making them the auditors of the controllers or whatever go on. Number one problem in the world is not bribing, as people are misguided to believe, but actually favoritism, the fact that whoever is in power gets more out of the public purse for himself, family, cronies, tribe, or political party, because many of corrupt countries are presently democracies. And this is what we have to change. And that means that all this audit and controls have somehow to involve the other part, people who systematically lose and are excluded. And I think this is where we should put our cards on.